I'm on a bit of a David and Goliath kick right now for 3 reasons. 1, because I just got back from vacation where I saw an incredible production of David's life from the Sight and Sound Theater. 2, there's an amazing new show on Amazon called The House of David that I just finished watching. And 3, because the story of David and Goliath is a picture of the spiritual battle that we all find ourselves in every day. Now, even if you aren't a Christian, you know the story of David and Goliath. It's the small Israelite boy who used a sling to destroy the giant champion of the Philistines. But when we say that Goliath was a giant, what exactly do we mean? Well, 1 Samuel 17 says that he was 6 cubits in a span. Now, I have enough trouble converting English to metric, and my yardsticks growing up did not have an edge that measured cubits and spans. But scholars will tell us that 6 cubits in a span in modern terms, it could be anywhere from 9'9" to 10'6". And yet, those same scholars will tell us in the next breath that this must be some kind of mistake, because obviously, nobody could be 10 feet tall. Even Christian scholars will teach that this must be some kind of typo in the Bible. Well, call me old-fashioned or call me a fundamentalist, but I believe that the whole Bible is God's word and that God doesn't make mistakes. So I take this to be the literal truth, but I also take it to be weird. And I'd like to explore why it's in the Bible. Turn to 1 Samuel 17 and let's get weird. Welcome to Weird Stuff in the Bible, where we explore scripture passages that are bizarre, perplexing, or just plain weird. This is Luke Taylor, and today we're going to be talking about how Goliath got so tall. So let's start with where we meet Goliath, and then we're going to trace his family line backwards to understand where he came from. Goliath is said to be approximately 10 feet tall, like I said before. Some say even 10'6". Now, the tallest person that we have on human record, like ever since they started keeping track of this in the past few hundred years, the tallest person that we have was 8'11". His name was Robert Wadlow. And this was a tall, lanky guy. There's some pictures of him out there. Certainly no beast of a man like Goliath was. I mean, Goliath was more than a foot taller than even the tallest guy that we have on record, Robert Wadlow. So, as I said, some take Goliath's height to be like a typo. Some say it must have actually been more like 6'6". And since the average male height was closer to like 5 feet tall back then, like in those people in that culture, someone who was 6'6", they might be seen as a giant. However, if we take the typo explanation, that still doesn't account for Goliath's great strength. 1 Samuel 17, 4-7, they say this, "And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits in a span. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield bearer went before him." So, with a spearhead of that size, Goliath's spear was estimated to be about 12.7 feet long. Now, if Goliath were just 6'6", a spear that's twice his height, that would be pretty impractical. So that would have to be a typo too, right? And then it said his armor was 5,000 shekels, and so that would equate to about 125 pounds in modern times. Now, I'm not sure if that sounds like a lot. In comparison, the average armor in those days was between 20 and 40 pounds. So for most men, 125 pounds worth of armor, that would have been impossible to wear into battle. I was at the gym today, just kind of out of curiosity. I tried lifting 125 pounds, and I did not like it. So Goliath's armor covering, his strength, it was about 3 times what was the average of a man back in those days. If you think of one of the knights of medieval times, you've seen how they're all armored up, right? A full suit of armor in those days in medieval times, that weighed about 50 pounds. So again, Goliath's armor was said to be 125 pounds. So, was that a typo as well? Or is the Bible truly saying that Goliath was a really, really, really big guy? He was a really, really, really big guy. A strong guy. Superhumanly big and strong. So like I said, The largest guy that we have on record, he was less than 9 feet tall. And again, that's in modern times where we have billions and billions of people to use as our sample size. Robert Wadlow is dead now. The tallest currently living man is Sultan Qasim. He is 8'3", so far from Goliath. How did this random guy Goliath from thousands of years ago, when there were way less people on the earth, how did he get so much bigger than even our modern humans? Well, let's start by analyzing where Goliath came from, because it's actually not so random once you understand his origins. So let me reread verse 4. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath. So Goliath was from a city called Gath. Now, what was Gath? Gath was one of the 5 cities of the Philistines. Those cities were Gath, Ekron, Ashdod, Ashkelon, and Gaza. And when I say Gaza, yes, it is the same Gaza that you hear about today, where they sent all those terrorists into Israel about 18 months ago, slaughtered a whole bunch of Jewish people. The Israelites and the Gazans, they have been in conflict for thousands of years. Now, why is that? Kind of a side note here, but once you understand about demonic strongholds and territorial spirits, we understand why this conflict doesn't end. And I believe that it can't end until Israel doesn't just defeat the terrorists in Gaza, but cleanses the land of its idols and its altars. And until it does that, it doesn't really matter how badly they defeat Gaza, those same spirits are going to have a foothold in that region until the altars are destroyed. The same terrorists are going to come back and afflict Israel again because the principalities over that region, they have not yet been displaced. So I know that some of that's kind of speculative. That's my theory on that. But I say that based on what I've been studying, especially on this podcast, about spiritual gates and altars. And so anyway, we'll leave that as a side note for now, and we're going to continue studying Goliath here. So Gath is one of the 5 Philistine cities. Now let's talk about the inhabitants of Gath. We're going to hop in a DeLorean here. Okay, we're going to go back in time a few hundred years and go back to the time of Joshua. And his book talks about the exploits of the Israelites as they took the promised land, the land of Israel. And it talks about how they drove out these people who were called the Anakim. So Joshua 11, verses 20 through 21, they say, and at that time, Joshua came and cut off the Anakim from the mountains, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, from all the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel. Joshua utterly destroyed them with their cities. None of the Anakim were left in the land of the children of Israel. They remained only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod. So the Anakim had been driven into Gath, the city where Goliath came from. I mean, that is so important. I'm going to say it again. The Anakim had been driven into Gath. So maybe you're wondering, what are the Anakim? Well, let's talk about where the Anakim came from. So back in the DeLorean now, okay? We're going to go back one more generation. We're going to go to the book of Numbers, and it contains the story where God first told the Israelites to go in and take the promised land. And so if you know the story, then you know that the Israelites chickened out of doing this the first time they were told to do it. Now, before we judge the Israelites too unfairly, let's consider what they were looking at as they considered fighting it out here for the promised land. When the spies came back from scouting out the land, this is what they said in Numbers 13, verse 33. I'm reading from the NIV right here. They said, "We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak came from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." So it said there in Numbers 13:33, they saw the Nephilim. Other translations, they might say the giants right here, but it means essentially the same thing. They saw the giants in the land. They were beings of superhuman size, superhuman strength, and they littered the promised land. So when it says, like, we seem like grasshoppers to them, was that an exaggeration? Well, I mean, it might have been an exaggeration in the literal sense, okay? A grasshopper or a human is approximately 25 to 35 times larger than a grasshopper. That's according to an AI chatbot that I just asked, okay? So I don't believe that the giants of Numbers 13:33, I don't think they were 25 times taller than the Israelites. I don't think this statement is literally true. But I also don't believe that they were just a few inches taller, like 6 inches or a foot taller. I believe these were giants like Goliath, that they were 10, 12, perhaps even 13 feet tall, maybe even more than that. I believe that these giants were probably about twice as tall as the Israelites themselves. So it's not really as much of an exaggeration as it might sound whenever we're reading the Israelites' words there. These giants would have been intimidating to any of us, okay? I'm not giving the Israelites a pass. I mean, God didn't give them a pass. We'll talk about this more at the end, but God's opinion on the giants was that, yeah, they were big, but they were very beatable. And so he was going to enable the Israelites to topple these giants. They just needed to have faith. And it's not even faith in themselves. They had to have faith in God to work through them to accomplish the task that he set before them to do. But yes, they were literal giants that the Israelites were being told to fight. So I don't believe Goliath that he was just a one and done unique dude who just happened to be really tall. I believe there was an entire race of people in those days who lived among the Canaanites and among the Philistines, and they were called the Anakim. They were the descendants of Anak. Note again what verse 33 said. The descendants of Anak came from the Nephilim. So, what are the Nephilim? Well, most listeners of this podcast probably already know. Let me just catch you up real quick in case you don't. And by the way, this is probably the weirdest thing that I believe, like the weirdest thing that I ever talk about on this podcast, and you're getting it today. Despite the fact that I talk about this in a lot of episodes, I have not lost sight of the fact that this is a really, really strange thing that the Bible tells us about here, okay? I'm self-aware of how crazy this sounds if you're hearing it for the first time. You've probably heard it before, especially if you're listening to a podcast like this. But let's talk about the origin of the Nephilim. So a long time ago, ancient biblical times, there were these spiritual beings who were called the sons of God, and they created the giants, or the Nephilim. This is talked about in Genesis 6. The sons of God are spiritual beings. They are tasked with watching over mankind. And they're also called the Watchers. The Bible calls them the Watchers as well. So different sons of God or Watchers, they were tasked with overseeing certain sectors of the world. And then after a while, these angelic beings, they started watching the women a little too closely, lustfully even. And they came down and they mated with human women. Again, if this is your first time hearing this, I know it sounds crazy. Personally, the only reason that I believe it is because the Bible says it happened, okay? And it says this unambiguously, that this is what happened. So let's get in our DeLorean one more time. We're going to go back to Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4. It says this: When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. So, this is how the Nephilim, or the giants, were created. When these angelic beings mated with the women, they created offspring that were half human, half angel. Or some might say, half human, half demon, although I don't think that would be technically correct. I'll address that in the mailbag segment later. So this is where the Nephilim giants came from. They were the offspring of these ancient marriages. So if you're hearing about this for the first time, you're probably wondering, what in the world are you talking about, Luke? If this is real, if this really happened, why would I just be hearing about this now? Like, wouldn't this something wild like this, wouldn't it be mentioned all over the place? Well, it is. This was common knowledge among the ancient peoples. It's referenced lots of times throughout the rest of the Bible, even by Jude and by Peter in the New Testament. And it's the explanation for why we see these other giants throughout Israel's history in the Old Testament. In fact, let's talk about that next week. I'm going to put a pin in this for now. But next week, let's talk about Goliath's brothers and the other giants of the Bible. And so that's what we'll discuss next time. And make sure you're subscribed. If you haven't hit that follow button yet, make sure you're subscribed so you can get that episode. As a ministry update real quick. So this past week, I finished my assignment as the interim pastor at a church called Bella Vista Assembly of God in gorgeous Northwest Arkansas. It was an incredible 3 months for me and my family, truly some of the greatest months of my life. Unfortunately, all good things come to an end. The new pastor took over this past week, But fortunately to you all, I get to focus a bit more on this podcast now. I mean, I'll be honest, I really struggled a lot of times to keep up with doing the podcast as well as creating all these sermons and the Bible studies that I was teaching at the church in Arkansas. And sometimes for the podcast, I really wasn't satisfied with the quality of some of the episodes over the past few months. And yet, like, I just had to put the episodes out. I had to keep going. So, and even despite that, the podcast continued to grow. May was our best month of downloads yet. And there were 2 episodes I released last month, and they were our top downloaded ever. So I'm just really grateful that like the podcast continued to do well, despite that I was just being pulled in these other directions and had so many priorities I was juggling lately, not to mention launching the website. So if we have a website now, weirdstuffinthebible.com, and check it out if you have not already done so. And also, I want to comment on something that I was just reading in Genesis 6 a few minutes ago. It said, "Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. And so that verse has caused many Christians to think that God put a 120-year time limit on the lifespans of human beings based on that verse. Now, I think that's a misunderstanding of that verse. In fact, that is quite literally how the New Living Translation will translate it. I think that's a major translational error. And so what I'm going to do for this week, I'm going to put an article on the front page of our website, and it explains this verse, Genesis chapter 6, verse 3. And so if you go to our website, and if you want to read some more about that verse, that's the featured article. It's not a new one. I launched it with the site a few weeks ago, but it's the featured article on the front page, and there will be more articles to come for the site. So if you enjoyed today's episode, but if you just want to dive a little deeper, you can go read that article about Genesis 6:3, weirdstuffinthebible.com once again. So, and we just took a vacation this past week as well. After I wrapped up my duties at the church, we had some wonderful family time. I was very thankful for it. But I'm ready to get back to work here and hopefully produce some excellent educational content here for the podcast and for the website. Let me go through a few mailbag comments that I've received lately. Vicky sent this message. She sent it while I was on vacation, actually. I got the email while I was sitting at the hotel pool and watching my son play in the pool. And so I just typed up a response to it right there. But I'm going to go ahead and share it here as well. Vicky said this. She said, "What is the difference between fallen angels and demons?" And so my theory on that, and I did not come up with this theory, this is what the book of Enoch teaches. But my idea on that is that the demons, or the unclean spirits that we read about in the Bible, these are the spirits of the Nephilim. And the Bible hints at this in a few places, but again, it's explicitly stated in the book of Enoch. The traditional view that most modern Christians have is that the demons are the fallen angels. However, I don't think I could find a single verse that supports that idea. If anyone knows of a verse that supports the idea that demons are fallen angels, please let me know, because I personally, I can't think of one, despite the fact that 99% of churches, that's just what they believe about where demons come from. I don't think there's a verse that teaches that anywhere. So correct me if I'm wrong, but there are verses in the Bible that hint that the spirits of the Nephilim are the demons that we fight against today and that Jesus was casting out in the New Testament times. So fallen angels, I believe they're a higher class of being than the demons. And some of them were literally the fathers of the demons. But the demons basically take their marching orders from the fallen angels. And so I did do a whole episode about this, episode number 25. It's called The Origin of Demons. And so we've done a lot of origins talk today, origins of the Anakim and the Nephilim and Goliath's origins. And so if you want the origin of the demons, that was about a year ago, but that was episode 25. I also got a message today from Annie, and she had 3 questions. She said, is Satan a name, or does it just mean accuser? Aren't all the fallen angels Satan? And aren't there many Satans? And so to explain on that a little bit, so the word Satan or ha-Satan in Hebrew, it means adversary or accuser. Now, it can be used as kind of a generic word or a label to just mean an enemy, someone who stands against you. There's several examples of this. in the story of Balaam and his donkey that he's riding on in Numbers chapter 22, it said the angel of the Lord stood in Balaam's way as a Satan. Okay, he was there to block Balaam, to stand against him. This was a good angel. I think it was actually Jesus, but it says he was standing there as an adversary or a Satan to block Balaam. So that word, Satan, it could be used as a generic label that could apply to anybody. There's other examples you could look at of that. 1 Kings 11 has some. So there can be many Satans in that sense, but there is also this one specific guy who is the Satan or Hasatan, and he is the prince of demons or the ruler of the demonic realm. This guy is the one who was the serpent who tempted Eve in the garden. He is Lucifer. He is the devil. He's referred to as the accuser of the brethren. He's called the dragon in Revelation. In fact, Revelation 12:9, it says, "And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world." See, that verse right there is making it clear all of these titles are talking about the same guy. Now, some theorize that there's a difference between Lucifer and Satan and the serpent and on. But that verse right there, it seems to nullify that theory. So Satan is a specific spiritual being. Now, your other question was, are all the fallen angels Satan? No, they all work for Satan, but Satan is the one in charge. Now, there are times in the Bible that Jesus might refer to casting out demons. He might call it casting out Satan. It doesn't mean that those demons are literally Satan. It's just that they work for Satan. And we do it too. We might be having a bad day and we say something like, "Oh man, the devil, he's really after me today." Well, you could very well have demons that are after you, but Satan himself, like the prince of darkness himself, he probably has bigger fish to fry. He's probably off writing the next bill for Congress to pass or making it take 3 years before the next season of Severance can come out. Okay, the real devil, he doesn't even know your name. The real Satan. But there are many demons who are after you, and I hope that you're making yourself a problem for them. I hope many demons right now know your name and that they tremble whenever you get out of bed in the morning. And so in closing thoughts today, that is the thought that I want to end us with. Let's make problems for Satan's kingdom. I love David's attitude when he sees this giant. 1 Samuel 17, it tells us that he said, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" And David, he's like a teenager, yet he was not intimidated by this giant. He was totally confident in God's ability to slay this giant through him, and he didn't back down. Now, as I said during the Mailbag segment, we have Goliaths to fight today, and they're in the spiritual realm. They are the spirits of the ancient giants. Unlike the giants, we can't see them because we are flesh, they are spirit, so they can do things that we can't. But guess what? So can God. God can fight the battles that we can't fight in the spirit realm. And this world might have demons in it, but it's our world. God gave us the dominion. So you have more authority here than they do. So let there be no intimidation today in this spiritual conflict that we find ourselves in. Yes, the New Testament warns us about Satan, about fallen angels, about the demons. We take them seriously, but we don't have to be intimidated by them. If you are a Christian, that same Holy Spirit that casted out all those demons in the Gospels and in the book of Acts now resides in you. You have Goliaths in your life, but you can also bring them down. Their heritage is of the giants. Our heritage is of the giant killers. And if you think that slaying giants sounds weird, I hope you'll be a little more weird today too. Thanks for listening. God bless you for sticking around till the end. And we'll see you next time on Weird Stuff in the Bible.